15 years ago, on a cool, crisp autumn morning, everything seemed normal as I strolled into my third grade classroom, ready for another day of school. Today's lesson, the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Now, fractions and friction I'd heard of, but fiction and nonfiction, this was something new. Now, I think I'm pretty smart, and I thought I had the concept down perfectly. Until the teacher gave her example. You see, for her, the Easter Bunny was the perfect example of fiction when juxtaposed with the nonfiction dinosaurs. Surely I've misheard. I mean, the Easter Bunny is much more believable than dinosaurs. So I went after school to confirm, and I'd heard correctly. Fellow Toastmasters and most honored guests, who here has ever believed in the Easter Bunny? Come on, get your hands up. You in the yellow back there, I know you believe in the Easter Bunny. Come on, guys. Well, when I was a kid, I listened very carefully the night before for the giant rabbit hopping down the street. Later in the evening, I'd go to bed early just so I could wake up that much sooner to all the delights that had been left for me and my siblings. Or later that morning, when it was time for the Easter egg hunt, well, I guess it was more of a race with me against my 5 siblings, running around the yard looking for every last egg. I'm sure we forgot a few. But you're telling me that with one slip of my 3rd grade teacher's tongue, I was to believe that the Easter Bunny had hid his last egg? I don't think so. And you see, my parents had told me colorful stories of the many fantastic characters that lit up our lives and helped us to stretch the idea of what was possible. So who was I going to believe? My parents? Or the homework hustling teacher? I raced home with just one thing on my mind. I mean, who did she think she was, lying to all those helpless children like that? I had to make a confrontation. I mean, it was an order. What were we going to do? The Easter Bunny was coming first. Who was next? Santa Claus? The Tooth Fairy? The Sandman? Wonder Woman? I had to find out the truth. The world needed to know. And I did too. I called the police. They weren't very helpful. The woman who answered the phone told me to hand it to my mother. And next time, only to call if there were an emergency. An emergency? The Easter Bunny was missing. Those foolish policemen, they don't know anything anyway. What I needed was a pro. Someone who could find the Easter Bunny and prove my 3rd grade teacher wrong. An expert. Someone who knew the truth. Of course, Dr. Seuss. I ran to my mother and I begged her to take me to the library. And the moment I stepped through that door, I marched straight over to the Seuss section. I pulled his largest reference off the shelf. I read everything from Hop on Pop to Fox and Socks. And even with Seuss's research in hand, I came up empty-handed. Tired and defeated, I looked at my mother and said, "Mom, you'd better sit down for this. I've got to talk to you about some serious stuff." She quickly looked at me and said, "Granny, what happened? Did you forget your library card?" My library card? Couldn't she see that this was so much more dire than that? Well, I broke down and I demanded to know. Was it true? Had the Easter Bunny truly fallen to fiction? Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that it is true. And he is no longer with us. Well, perhaps he is in hopping spirit. But 15 years ago, the steadfast faith I had in him was no more. Later on that day, after the demise of the great E.B., it dawned on me, and I went to my mother once more. I looked her straight in the eye with a false bravado, and I said, "Mom, tell me the truth. I can handle it." "What about Santa Claus?" And she told me the truth. And I guess I grew up a little more that day. However, just because these whimsical creatures can't be seen in the flesh doesn't mean they don't have a place in our hearts and histories. And the effect they have on us is definitely a work of nonfiction.